Questions of Doom.
Hello, well, welcome back to another Questions of Doom. In this series, I attempt to answer questions which you send my way using the archaeosoup@gmail.com email address, as displayed on the homepage, but also actually at the end of this video. Now, today I'm answering a question which I'm often sent. Actually, I've been sent this question quite a few times in the past few days, and so I figured it would be well worth answering. And the question is quite simple. It is whether or not you should dig up your garden to try and find some archaeology. Now, in answering this question via video, I'm hoping that it'll be useful to not only the people who are asking the question, but also anyone else out there in YouTube land who's thinking or wondering the same thing. So this is a very interesting question, and certainly I've thought about this when I was a youngster, very interested in archaeology at home, and actually my mum was extremely enthusiastic for me to go off and excavate our back garden. However, there were a couple of things in that instance that made it a little bit tricky. Not least the presence of a massive tree which had very substantial roots in a relatively small garden, so it would have been a nightmare. But I suppose there are several things to consider. I wouldn't say no, don't do it, but there are several things to consider. First of all, there's the location of your property or your garden. Is it likely to have something of interest underneath it? This can be either checked by just studying the landscape and thinking, is it likely that people would have lived on this spot in the past? But also as well, actually, you can go to your local archives, either county archives or even a historic monuments records office. And they can actually outline, hopefully for you, or you can research yourself, whether or not where your house is likely to have some archaeology. The second aspect is how old or how new is your property. Older properties, let's say built at the beginning of the 20th century, they tend to have more of a chance of you finding archaeology there than newer properties. If you live in, say, a newer development, the land is stripped back much more efficiently, it's cleared of any debris before the building is built, but then crucially it's filled in with debris from the building site. So you may have already noticed that when you're doing your gardening, you're going to more often than not find chunks from chunks of brick or even broken teacups from builders. Now this actually also goes for older properties. For example, in our garden at home in Wales, we did often find bits of pottery from what we suspect was the building phase of the house. But there was just across, there was a field opposite us, and across on the other side of that field there was a bungalow estate for essentially a retirement bungalow estate. And underneath that, we know for sure in the 1920s, builders discovered or uncovered Roman remains, essentially what could have been a Roman fort. And there's actually a long lost Roman settlement in that part of North Wales, which people are still hunting for. And when these guys found this stuff, actually what they did was they just demolished it. They took it out of the ground and just ruined it. So sometimes having a slightly older property can also be a bad thing, because there wasn't the protection rather in place for monuments. So with newer properties, land is cleaned as a matter of practice, and if there's nothing of obvious significance there, it'll go. And with older properties, if there's something of great significance there, often it will have been seen as an inconvenience and simply be washed away, plucked down to the ground and destroyed. However, sometimes you are lucky, and actually people in that bungalow estate do occasionally find Roman pottery, and even so I believe a couple of people have found a chunk of Roman wall in their garden. So I suppose what I'm outlining here is that there are many pros and cons for digging up your garden based upon the location of your house. Whether or not it's legal For the most part, yes, it is perfectly legal. You can go ahead with it within your own land. So long as I wouldn't recommend you go down any further than a metre maximum, because after that it becomes increasingly dangerous. As bizarre as it sounds, you can't have trenches which are much deeper than, much deeper than 2 metres actually, without it beginning to become a major event, and potentially actually even collapsing in on you. Especially if you've got children involved in the excavation, it's well worth considering keeping the excavation minimal. Try just digging maybe a 1 metre square test pit and seeing what's in that. As far as success stories go, though, recently in the Republic of Ireland, I covered on Archaeoscoop a story of a man who had a whole tomb, well, not a tomb, sorry, an underground storage chamber from the Neolithic in his garden. It was part of a rockery. And he didn't quite understand what it was until an archaeologist came around and pointed out, well, this is very important. And it became a news story from there. And I loved it because he said he was going to put up fairy lights inside to make it into a feature for his children or grandchildren. So people do find things in their garden, and actually already on the Archaeosoup Facebook page, a couple of people have shared a story about having found pottery, glass, that kind of thing in their gardens. So it's certainly a possibility, and I hope I haven't put you off the notion. It's just probably worth considering. So in summary, what I would say is that first of all you need to research where your property is. Is it likely to have archaeology in place? Either prehistoric, but depending on its location. But for that, you'd have to understand whether or not, let's say, sea level rises and just how glaciated or how post-glacial your particular part of Britain is. But also as well, more recently, was there a Tudor settlement there? Was there a slightly earlier medieval town there? Was there a Saxon settlement? All this kind of thing, even Roman archaeology. If you can identify that, then the next stage might be worthwhile going to a records office and looking into it in more detail. If you then feel as though you definitely want to go ahead, as I say, I wouldn't recommend doing anything tremendous. Just dig 1, maybe 2 1 metre square test pits, and that I'm sure you'll have plenty of fun doing, and I'm sure it'll if you place them strategically, it should give you a good statistical analysis of whether or not your garden is likely to contain archaeology, the find of the century. And ultimately, that's the point, isn't it? You never know what you might find. So if you may come across the next big thing in Britain, who knows, or wherever else you're from. Sorry, I don't mean to be Britain centric here. But yes, so those are the things to consider. I wish you well. Unfortunately, where I live here at the moment in the northeast of England, we have no garden. Oh. So I cannot join you, unfortunately, unless I start digging up the local park, and then I will be fined, if not arrested. But nonetheless, good luck on your excavative adventures, and please do report back if you do find anything of interest. Feel free to either send me a message or comment below. And if any of you watching have found something in your garden, please share your stories below via comment. So that's it until next time. Thank you very much for your question.